Protests against the judicial reform continue in Israel, as several attempts are ongoing to negotiate a compromise that will end the internal debate in a way that will be accepted by large sections of the population. At the same time, international financial groups are warning that the implications of the reform might be harsh for Jerusalem, and world leaders also express their worries for Israel's democracy. In an attempt to decipher the full implications of this event, the Jerusalem Press Club speaks with Dr. Elie Klutstein, former Deputy Attorney General for International Law for almost a decade. Dr. Schondorf holds a PhD from New York University and is a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Dr. Schondorf, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Okay. My first question is, as someone coming from the judicial system, who has been there for many years and was also one of the nominees for Attorney General, do you think that there's a need for any kind of reform at all?
Yes, I think it should be said that, in my view, we have in Israel a legal system that is really an outstanding legal system already. The Israeli Supreme Court, I think, has receives praise all over the world. But having said that, I don't think that means that no reform at all is necessary. I think every system, be it as good as it can be, can always you can always have things done better. And I think there are issues in Israel that could be improved. One issue is the length of legal proceedings, for example. Legal proceedings here take a very long time, and I think it affects the public perception of the legal system. I think also there are parts of the population, mostly on the conservative side, that don't feel that they are sufficiently represented within our legal system, and I think it's a fair claim on the side of the more conservative of the more conservative components of our population, and I think that it is legitimate to introduce reforms that will improve on that aspect.
And what about other aspects that are being talked about in the current reform? They're talking about the override clause, and they're talking about changing maybe the way that the court could debate absence or disqualification of prime minister and stuff like that. Are these also issues that need to be dealt with?
I think that some of the issues that are brought up, or some of the concerns that are brought up by those that seek to introduce reforms, are legitimate issues that can be discussed. I think the key point is that the main argument from the conservative side is that on that view, that the Israeli legal system has too much power in comparison to the political system. And I think the main problem with the current reform that is proposed, that it not only diminishes the power of the legal system, or the relative power of the legal system, that I think could be discussed. The problem is that it puts absolute power within the hands of the politicians, of the coalition power, of the coalition government, with no check on that power. And I think that there is a concern. So I don't think that the issue is whether some reform could be introduced. I think the problem is, or the main difficulty and the anger in certain parts of the public, is that the proposed reform is very extreme, and it puts all power in the hand of the coalition government, of the politicians, with no checks. And this is, of course, in tension with some of the basic ideas of democracy, that you will have three branches of governments with checks and balances, that guarantee that each branch will operate within its own realm, within its own sphere of power.
We do hear lately, in the past few days and weeks, several suggestions for, a compromised reform, some made by the President Herzog himself and some by other legal experts. What do you think about those, propositions, those reforms?
I think it is essential for us here in Israel eventually to come to some sort of a compromise. I mean, Israel is, in many ways, it's a miracle. If you take the starting point of Israel, Jewish people coming from so many different countries and places to a country that has had very little resources, and what we have been able to achieve thus far, such a successful country, one of the 30 biggest economies worldwide, high-tech, with high-tech industry that is world known and the power in the region. All of this happened because we were able to put aside the differences and unite and work together. And I think eventually we're all going to stay here, conservatives and liberals, and we will need to live together. So I think it's essential that we come to a compromise now. Until we come to a compromise, we pay a very significant price in the current situation. We already see some of the economic difficulties or problems that are created as a result of this huge disagreement between the significant parts of the public and the government. So I think it's essential that we come to a compromise. I think there are different proposals for a compromise, and the president has been very active in promoting a compromise. I think the approach the president outlined is a very reasonable approach to a compromise. It's at the level of principles. It's not yet in the details, and I think it's good that there are different groups that work on trying and developing these and putting them into a more concrete proposals.
Okay. I want to ask you maybe a more personal question. You have worked with Netanyahu himself for many years. You have seen him working. Do you agree with the claim that this reform is tailored for his personal agenda and that it is not working for what's best for the state of Israel?
I always try to avoid, having worked with so many people and so many politicians, I always try to avoid putting or associating motives or to people's to different political initiatives. It's always not just one thing, and I think we need to assess the proposals on their merits. As I said, I think that the current proposal as they stand go very far. They put too much power in the hands of politicians in a way that leaves political power unchecked and does not protect enough basic human rights, basic civil rights of the citizens of Israel, does not protect enough the democratic structures. As I said, it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be any reform. I think there should be a way to introduce reforms that will address some of the concerns of the more conservative segments of our society, and yet will not be as so extreme as to undermine our democratic tradition and values.
And do you expect that if one of those proposals will be, accepted or adopted by the government and major parties, maybe such as Yesh Atid and Gantz's party, do you think that we will see an end of the protests in the streets and maybe Israel's image in the world will be better again?
But I think if eventually we can reach a compromise that is widely accepted within the Israeli public, I think this will put an end to the crisis and will also have an impact or undo some of the negative implications that the current impasse presented. I do think it is a challenge because not all, while it appears, or it may appear that there are two camps, right? The liberals and the conservatives. In reality, it's more complicated. Also within the liberal group and also within the conservative groups, there are different nuances, and not necessarily all of the segments or all of the individuals in these groups will be able to agree to any particular compromise that will be presented. The challenge is to present a compromise that will be accepted by a sufficiently large majority within both of these groups. And I think if we are able to get there, and it will require some leadership also of our politicians, if we're able to get there, I think that this will bring an end to the current crisis.
Okay, I wanted to ask you something that personally interested me, and you are a legal expert. And considering that many people actually claim now that this reform might bring about the end of Israeli democracy, what kind of resistance can they legally deploy? Like, what is legitimate within the boundaries of a democracy that is trying to defend itself? And what may be considered not legitimate? Would violent acts, for instance, be allowed? What can be done and what cannot be done, basically?
Well, I think first of all, I think we are very far from such a chaos, and I think we should all do our utmost to prevent the situation deteriorating to a point where things get out of control. I think it is very important that leaders, people in a position of influence, speak in favor of trying to compromise and to come together so that we don't need to face these difficult realities. I don't think violence is justified under any circumstances, and I think protests. That it is important to keep the protests within the boundaries of the law. I'm happy to say that I think the protests show something about the strengths of the Israeli democracy. I think we can all be very proud of people, whatever their opinion might be, being able to voice their opinion in such a powerful way in the public, and not being able to resist what they think is an incorrect way for the country to proceed. I think that so far we've seen these demonstrations done in accordance with the law in a very responsible and in a very responsible way, and I hope that that we will not get to a point that things deteriorate, but that the government will also take into account this important voice of the public that is being presented, and try to come to an agreed resolution of the crisis with the opposition, with the leadership of the opposition.
No one is doubting, the right of the protesters to voice, of course, their concern. But one of the issues that have been debated lately in Israel is, for instance, the question of, are you allowed to block a road or a major highway when you're protesting? And for instance, the Minister of Internal Security Affairs is against this act, and he's ordering or trying to order the police to stop it, to make the protesters avoid blocking the road. What do you think about this issue, for instance?
So traditionally, in Israel, we have a tradition of, the way demonstrations take place and what is allowed and what is not allowed. There is significant jurisprudence of the Supreme Court. You need to balance between the need and the importance of allowing the public to voice its opinion, to demonstrate, to exercise its freedom of speech and expression, with the need also to maintain a degree of public order. And oftentimes they would come to agreements between the demonstrators and the police that the road will be blocked for a specific period of time, and then it will be reopened. Sometimes, when they're unable to reach an agreement, there may be it may lead to clashes between the demonstrators and the police. Again, my hope is that we will not need to get to this point. That we will be able to, or that the message that comes from the peaceful demonstrations of hundreds of thousands of people already for 9 or 10 consecutive weeks will be heard, and that some sort of a compromise will be achieved. I honestly believe that it's within reach. That while there are gaps of the gaps between the two camps of principle, and there is significant disagreement, there is also a way to find reasonable solutions that, while they will not give any of the camps completely what they would have perhaps dreamt of, they would still be sufficiently acceptable to both camps in a way that will make it possible for all of us to continue live here together in Israel and focus on developing this country, developing the economy, the prosperity, the security of for the people of Israel.
I want to move on maybe to more international aspects of this issue, of this event. One of the claims against the judicial reform that it might expose IDF troops to danger of being arrested abroad. You've worked on this issue for many years extensively. What's your opinion about it?
Well, there isn't, of course, a direct link between a judicial reform and attempts to file claims against IDF forces. For years, we've seen various organizations trying to bring complaints against IDF forces in foreign countries or in international courts, and all of these have been consistently rejected, mostly because of the fact that the IDF conducts itself in accordance with the laws of armed conflict. Part of it is because the IDF gets excellent legal advice from its legal advisors. It always complies with the legal advice that it gets from its legal advisors, and it has excellent mechanisms for the investigation of allegations of violations of the laws of armed conflict that are generally recognized internationally as good mechanisms. So, what will happen if the reform passes, right? It's very difficult to assess what kind of what will be the effect on the practice of the IDF. I think it is fair to say that one argument that it may be more difficult or if today foreign prosecutors and prosecutors in the international courts give a lot of credibility to the Israeli legal system, right? To the Israeli attorney general, to the Israeli legal advisors, because they recognize what is true, that these are independent and professional legal advisors or prosecutors. If that image changes, even if in reality they remain independent and professional, but if that image is broken, it may be more difficult than to convince international prosecutors to reject complaints just on the basis that they've been investigated or looked at within Israel. And I think there the damage is, already we see some damage of the reputation, to the reputation of the Israeli legal system by that discussion. I should say, I don't think that, that this means that we should avoid any, the fact that the system currently has excellent reputation internationally doesn't mean that we should avoid any reform, or that there are no ways to improve or to introduce reforms. I think that the people introducing the reforms should be sensitive also to this aspect and should make sure that the reform not only ensures in practice, but is also seen to ensure internationally the independence and professionalism of the Israeli legal system, of the Israeli legal officials, the attorney general, the prosecutors. I think it is very important.
Interesting. Many Western countries, or several Western countries, including the US, have criticized the reform, even fiercely. What is the role of other countries from your experience in internal issues such as this? Maybe can you remember other incidents in which the Americans, for instance, raised similar concerns with their Israeli counterparts?
I think by and large, countries try to avoid commenting or interfering with matters that are considered to be internal matters of other states, and I think usually this is this is a right course of action, because we should respect the right of each people to choose the way they are governed. But at the end of the day, Israel has very close relationships with certain countries, the United States for sure, and many countries in Europe. And this friendship is based on a sense not just on mere interests, but also on a strong sense of shared values, of standing for justice, for democracy, for things that we all believe in. And that's why, we feel that we're similar and we can cooperate and work together and help each other. And so I don't think it's illegitimate for other countries, other governments to voice concern about, things that if they feel that developments that happen in Israel could undermine the relationship or could have an impact on that. And I think, we in Israel and also the government, we should take it very, very seriously when such comments are made, because they are not made very often. Again, I would caution against, other countries trying to dictate exactly, the way we should do things in Israel. We don't do that to other countries, and I don't think other countries intend to do that for us. But I think it is important that we understand in Israel how things that we do, even if we do them internally, how they are perceived by other countries, especially friendly countries, and what their impact might be on our relationship. I'm confident that when these comments are made, they're made from a good place, from a place that wants to help and wants to ensure a continuation of good and cooperative relationship, and they do not come from a place that tries to harm in any way, or to even to intervene or to dictate to Israel what it needs to do.
Okay, this is very interesting, but I'm afraid our time is up. Dr. Elie Schondorf, former Deputy Attorney General, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's wish us all quiet days and that we find a way to live peacefully together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me here. And I just hope that we will soon be able to resolve all of the differences we have here within Israeli society, and move on to develop our country in the kind of more traditional way we've done it so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.